Jake.
Yeah,
Yep.
Jake. I would say the majority of the shows that I've seen, it's been with you and Andrew Bryan. And I have to say that, yeah, there's a lot wrong with what's going on with women, but you guys tilt really hard towards it being like the women being the primary catalyst for the issues that are going on in the dating world, when it's really both. Like, there's really a lot of things that are going wrong with both genders. And like, just blaming, pointing fingers, it's just boring, you know? Like, let's just figure it out.
You want to take this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, I don't think I actually say that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't actually say it's mostly women's fault when it comes to the whole, just the fuckery of the dating landscape. Although it probably is. So I'm prepared to actually have the conversation.
What makes you think that they say that it's mostly women? What gives you that impression?
Well, because the majority of the panelists, the majority of the panelists are women, and admittedly, some are very unfortunate in their thought processes, but I don't see men at this table who are also dumb and make dumb choices. It seems to just be like primarily the women.
What do you think are some of the dumb choices that men make? What are some of those things you're talking about?
Oh, there's so many.
Just a few.
Well, I would say, for one, doom scrolling Instagram for what they think the woman that they want. Listening to old people tell them that relationships and marriage aren't worth it. Spending too much time on devices. No social skills. Not being able to communicate, read body language, actually interact. And I think certain antiquated ideas about how this whole thing works with couples. Like, I think that there's a lot of, I don't know, on both sides, there's just some really outrageous expectations that I think
So just
we need
quickly,
to bring down to
with
the
the first
reality.
few, you've got doom scrolling, you've got unable to communicate, read body language, these sorts of things. When do the people on this show espouse those sorts of behaviours that they're correct?
No, I'm not. That's not what you asked me. You asked me what are some of the problems the men are having.
Yeah, but I'm
then-
making a bigger point. You said that they're primarily blaming women, which
No.
would mean that they're enabling the bad behaviour of men. At which point have they enabled bad behaviour of men or encouraged it?
It's more of like an example, like exemplary, so it's implied. So there's things that are actually said, and then there's things that are implied. So when the men come on, it seems to be that they're going after the women. I haven't really seen them go after men with the same energy, except for there was like two guys who were in the porn industry, and they kind of ripped them.
That would be a good example.
Yeah. So, but for the most part, it's mainly the women and directing what men think is wrong with
Do you
women.
think maybe it's because with the women they invite a broader cross-section of the population of women, so they get all different perspectives, whereas the men tend to, generally speaking, think a reasonably similar way? If you get like a guy like myself, Andrew Wilson, Charlie Kirk, guys like this, we all have a reasonable, with a lot of disagreements, we have a reasonably similar worldview, whereas with the girls there's a lot more to pick apart because you guys are all so different. There's like 10 of you. So you think there's just more subject matter there?
I don't know. I never thought about that.
Yeah, because, I mean, there are a lot of issues with guys. With guys, one of the biggest issues is porn. Overconsumption of internet porn, and like you said, doom scrolling, lack of motivation, ambition. But, you know, there's a lot of societal factors that encourage this. There's also a lot with women, but I think it's just brought to the forefront more because there's so many of you.
So you're saying that like more men are suffering from these things, so it's like pretty much the same. But wouldn't it be kind of interesting and good if more men would come to podcasts like this and express what their frustrations
generally
are to an actual
speaking,
woman?
men in their own social circles like hash these things out with each other. There's not really much of a need for it because the world tells us these sorts of things. If Brian was doing something absurd, I'd just tell him, hey Brian, you're doing something crazy. But generally with women, I think you guys tend to be much less accountable to each other and to yourselves. Like we see women who will say, I'm a 10, I'm a 10, I'm a 10, I'm the best thing since sliced bread. But with guys, we just don't act like that because we really can't afford to, or else the world would just punch us in the face.
So men are conditioned to not have confidence?
That's not confidence, that's delusion. If it's false, what you're saying, then it's delusion.
Okay.
It's a bit different because, like guys, like my closest friends are my two brothers, and the level of competitiveness that we have with each other is, you guys would probably cry if you heard some of the conversations that we had with each other, because it's just so honest and accountable. So I can't really get away with it.
I have 2 older brothers, and
Yeah.
even though I am a woman, I do understand.
Yeah, 100%. But there's certain, and also just in, this is something that Jordan Peterson says a lot, if you guys ever listen to him, that men tend to operate within a structure where there's physical consequences if it gets to a certain point. So if I say something to a guy, it can escalate to a point where there's going to be physical consequences. So generally we tend to regulate our relationships, which regulates ourselves and our level of delusion and how rude we can be, etc. But women, unfortunately, don't really have the same thing. So it's interesting when the opinions are expressed.
I have a question, like going back on it, maybe. I feel like there's a bunch of ways you can interpret, like rate yourself 1 out of 10. I feel like there's many ways you can interpret it. And, you know, there's the way, what do you think, like walking down the street, like what would you view me as versus like what do I see myself as? Because I would rate myself like higher because I have confidence within myself to dress how I want. I'm growing with my career. Like I do those things. So I view myself as like I'm expressing how I'd like to. But maybe you can interpret the question of like, because I don't think that's delusion, you know, like expressing yourself how you want and all of those things and viewing that as like a 10. But let's say...
I think that the kind of the definition of delusion is if you view yourself in a way that's not compatible with how the rest of the world sees you.
Well,
and like, because we have to regulate in society what is real and what isn't. And then when somebody sees themselves as a 10 and in societally, objectively speaking, there may be a 6 or a 7 or somewhere probably in the middle of the bell curve, then that would be delusion. Now, there's nothing wrong with having self-confidence and self-respect. That's a fantastic thing, and having intrinsic dignity. But I think that if you are actually a confident person, then you're confident enough to say that, you know, I'm a 6 or a 7, or I'm not the best thing ever. Because a 10 is a remarkable feat. If you ever see a 10, you look 3 times.
Correct. I could see that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously everyone has different types and all of these things that could contribute to like, you know, I might be like that person's a 10 and you might be like that person I wouldn't even say hi to, you know, and obviously those things. And
there's definitely subjective interpretations, and you know,
it's a very hard question.
I might like Eastern European girls, and another guy might like Latin girls. We might see them very different, but generally speaking, when we're looking at rating ourselves, it's on a global sort of scale. Like, and we can get a reasonably accurate estimate of where we think we are.
I could see that.
But also, this is just another thing as to why it's more interesting when girls flesh out their proper worldviews, is because you guys get a lot more male attention. Like if you're a pretty girl and you have an Instagram and you post some nice photos, you're going to get a lot of attention from guys.
Of course.
But us, I mean, I've got a big YouTube channel that's like nearly 700,000 subscribers. I only ever get men who inbox me, you know, guys who say, I like what you do. So, we don't have this constant flattery where we're, oh my God.
I don't disagree with you on any of that. I mean, the men viewing your stuff, you know, like you probably, I haven't seen you, I'm sorry, but you probably go on as like a male role model to these men, you know, like women, in my opinion, like role models, like I want to look at women as my role models. Like I can respect a man and his opinion, and like I do all the time. I'm like, I watch male YouTubers, I love Ben Shapiro, I love Brett Cooper, and I look up to both, but, you know, that's probably why. But that can be an issue that with men, you know, that they're giving women, and like she said, doom scrolling. And
this is another big thing. I mentioned porn before, and things that you mentioned were all great points as well.
I want to get back
but also,
I'd
say simping is another big thing. It's like something that's heavily discouraged on this show, is going to OnlyFans pages, paying for that sort of thing, and giving unrequited attention to